a human guest at an alien royal celebration. Then the king's daughter chose him. His hands, calloused from years of space exploration, hovered over the keyboard, hesitant yet curious. He had seen many messages in his career, from routine supply requests to urgent distress calls, but nothing like this. It was not just an invitation. It was an official request from the King of Veloria himself, summoning a human to attend a royal celebration on a planet known throughout the galaxy for its beauty, intelligence, and strict hierarchy. Elias leaned back in his chair, trying to process the magnitude of the situation. Humans had been explorers and traders in the galactic community for decades, but contact with the Velorians was rare. Their species was considered highly advanced, almost beyond comprehension. They were known for their elegant cities floating above crystal oceans, their incredible technology, and their unyielding customs. And now, he had been chosen to attend a celebration that would last a full week, one that would honor the king's long reign. Chosen, he muttered to himself. Not invited, chosen. The word echoed in his mind. To the Velorians, a choice was not casual. They did not pick humans for anything unless there was something extraordinary about them. Elias wondered what could have drawn their attention. He had done nothing remarkable lately, just the usual exploration missions and occasional rescue operations. Perhaps it was his latest report, where he had discovered a new star system with potential habitable planets. Or maybe it was the human trait the aliens so often commented on, our unpredictability. Regardless, the decision had been made, and he had little time to prepare. The journey to Veloria was unlike any other Elias had undertaken. Their planet was located in a densely populated sector, surrounded by nebulae that shimmered in shades of violet and gold. As he approached the orbit, he could see the city, floating towers that glimmered like jewels, connected by glowing bridges suspended in midair. Ships of various shapes and sizes hovered elegantly around the capital, like fireflies in a slow, deliberate dance. Elias docked at the royal landing station, where a group of Velorian attendants, tall and slender with shimmering skin that reflected the ambient light, greeted him. Their faces were angular but elegant, their eyes large and luminous. They did not smile as humans did, but there was a sense of curiosity in their gaze. "You are Elias Grant," one of them spoke in perfect galactic basic, the universal language used across the stars. "The king has awaited your arrival. Follow us." Elias rose from his seat and followed the attendants, his boots echoing softly on the crystalline floor. The station itself was a marvel of architecture. Transparent walls revealed layers of clouds beneath the city, with waterfalls of glowing liquid cascading into the depths. The sight was breathtaking, and Elias felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. He was about to meet an alien king, a being who had ruled his planet for centuries, and he had no idea what to expect. As they moved through the station, he noticed other guests, beings of many shapes and colors, each more extraordinary than the last. Some had multiple limbs, others had wings or shimmering fins. Many wore robes of delicate fabrics that seemed to float around them, adorned with jewels that reflected the light in countless patterns. Elias felt a twinge of self-consciousness in his simple human uniform, but he reminded himself that humans had often been underestimated, and then surprised everyone. Finally, they arrived at the main chamber of the palace, a vast hall with ceilings that seemed to reach the clouds themselves. The floor was polished to a mirror-like shine, reflecting the luminous sculptures that hovered above. At the far end of the hall sat the king, a majestic figure adorned in robes of deep blue and gold, his eyes glowing faintly with wisdom and authority. Around him stood advisors and nobles, their expressions formal and watchful. Elias bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. The king's gaze swept over him, sharp and calculating. For a moment it seemed as though he could see everything Elias had done, everything he was capable of. Then, to Elias' surprise, the king's expression softened slightly. "Human," the king said, his voice deep and resonant, echoing in the chamber, "you have been chosen to witness our celebration. You may walk among us as a guest, but know this, every action you take will be observed. The Velorians value intelligence, courage, and creativity above all. Do not disappoint us." Elias nodded, understanding the weight of the words. "I will do my best, Your Majesty." The king inclined his head, signaling the start of the festivities. Musicians, unlike any Elias had seen before, began to play. Their instruments emitted not just sound, but colors and patterns in the air, creating a living symphony that danced around the hall. The guests began to move gracefully, engaging in a complex ritual of greetings, gestures, and exchanges of intricate gifts. Elias observed carefully, trying to memorize the customs. Despite the alien formalities, there was a warmth in the atmosphere, a celebration of life, achievement, and unity. Elias felt a spark of excitement. Humans were often called reckless, chaotic, or unpredictable. But here, perhaps his differences could be an asset rather than a liability. As he mingled cautiously, he noticed a young Valorian woman, her skin shimmering like silver in the light, watching him intently. Her eyes were intelligent and curious, but there was also a glimmer of something he couldn't name, interest, perhaps, or amusement. Elias felt a strange pull, a recognition that she was more than just a spectator of the celebration. For the first time, he realized that being chosen was not just an honor, it was also a challenge. The week ahead would test not only his courage, but his ability to navigate a world of customs, intellect, and subtle dangers that humans rarely faced. And yet, deep down, he felt ready. Humans had a history of turning the unexpected into an advantage, and he intended to do just that. The night progressed, and the celebration grew more elaborate. Floating platforms displayed dances that defied gravity, holographic storytellers recounted the history of Veloria with astonishing clarity, and alien chefs presented dishes that shimmered and changed flavor with each bite. Elias sampled them cautiously, marveling at the complexity and thought behind each creation. By the end of the evening, he had already drawn the attention of several nobles, some impressed, some skeptical. Yet it was Princess Lyriel, the king's daughter, who intrigued him the most. She approached him as the crowd thinned, her movements graceful yet deliberate. "You are unlike other humans I have heard of," she said, her voice melodic but firm. "Most are too cautious or too reckless. You observe first, act later. It is a rare quality." Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps it is a human trait. We often survive by paying attention and adapting." She nodded, her gaze lingering on him a moment longer than etiquette demanded. "We shall see how well you adapt in the days to come." And with that, she moved on, leaving Elias with a mix of curiosity, anticipation, and a subtle sense of challenge. The human guest had arrived, and the stage for the celebration and the tests ahead was set. As he retired to his quarters that night, Elias could still hear the echoes of music, laughter, and shimmering light. He realized that this was more than just a celebration. It was an opportunity to prove that humans, despite being young and inexperienced in the galaxy, possessed a spark that even the most advanced species could not ignore. And somewhere deep inside, Elias felt a thrill. The unexpected invitation had led him to a world beyond imagination, and he intended to face it with courage, wit, and the very human quality that had carried his species across the stars: resilience. The next morning, Elias woke to the soft hum of the palace. The light filtering through the crystal walls painted shifting colors across the room, making the world outside appear alive with energy. His first night on Veloria had been strange and exhilarating, but he knew the real challenges had only just begun. A soft chime at the door announced the arrival of his attendants. They moved with the same elegance as yesterday, but their eyes now held a faint expression of expectation. "Commander Grant," one said, her voice calm and melodic, "the king requests your presence. Today you will participate in the trials of curiosity. These are not mere games, they are demonstrations of intelligence, skill, and creativity. You must prove that a human is worthy of presence in our court." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Trials of curiosity?" he asked. "They are our tradition," she replied. "Every guest of honor must attempt them. Success is not guaranteed. Observe carefully, act decisively." He nodded, straightening his uniform. The phrase, "act decisively," stuck with him. In his human experience, decisions often defined outcomes. Hesitation could be fatal, and improvisation could be heroic. He wondered how these qualities would fare in a society known for rigid customs and flawless precision. When he entered the grand arena, he was greeted by a spectacle unlike any he had seen. The hall had transformed. Floating platforms hovered above the floor, shifting in intricate patterns. Holographic puzzles projected into the air, displaying symbols and equations that twisted and turned in impossible geometry. Other guests, Aliens from far-off systems moved confidently, solving challenges with grace and speed. Their forms shimmered in the light, some walking on multiple limbs, others hovering effortlessly. The first trial was an intellectual puzzle. A series of translucent spheres floated in front of Elias, each containing a small, glowing symbol. The spheres moved in unpredictable patterns, aligning only when the symbols matched a hidden sequence. Many of the aliens glanced at him, curious about how a human would approach such a challenge. Elias studied the spheres, his brow furrowed. Unlike most of the other species, humans were not naturally gifted with instant recognition of complex patterns. But humans were creative thinkers. Where others saw only rules, Elias saw possibility. He took a deep breath, imagining the spheres as pieces of a map rather than a static puzzle. Then he began to predict their movements, shifting his hands in a series of deliberate motions. Slowly, the spheres aligned. The sequence revealed itself, forming a shimmering path of light. The crowd murmured in surprise. Elias had solved it, not through speed, but through adaptation and reasoning, qualities that no pre-programmed alien could replicate. Impressive, a Valorian noble whispered to her companion. He does not follow the expected methods, yet he succeeds. Elias barely noticed the comment. He was already preparing for the next trial, a skill-based challenge that combined agility, precision, and quick thinking. Floating platforms formed a labyrinth above a shallow pool of luminous liquid. Small drones zipped between the platforms, emitting pulses that disrupted balance and tested reflexes. The goal was to reach the center platform without touching the glowing liquid, a simple task for most Valorians, impossible for many others. Elias studied the layout. Unlike the aliens, humans relied on observation and improvisation rather than perfect physical coordination. He took a running leap to the first platform, adjusting midair to the drone's unpredictable paths. His movements were rougher, less elegant than those of the Valorians, but his determination compensated for the lack of natural grace. Step by step, he advanced, using clever tricks, jumping off drones to reach distant platforms, sliding along the edges, and timing his movements with intuition rather than pre-calculated precision. By the time he reached the center, the crowd erupted in astonishment. He had not been the fastest, nor the most graceful, but he had succeeded against overwhelming odds. At the center of the arena, he was greeted by Princess Lyriel, standing tall and composed, her silver skin glinting in the light. She extended a hand. "You approach challenges differently," she said, "but the outcome is undeniable. You adapt where others follow rules. That is intriguing." Elias shook her hand respectfully. "In human experience, rules are guidelines, not limits," he replied. "Sometimes thinking differently is the only way to succeed." She smiled faintly, a rare expression for Valorians. "Perhaps humans have potential we have underestimated." The trials continued throughout the day, each one testing a different quality. One involved deciphering alien writing that shifted in 3 dimensions, a task that would have confounded most. Elias used human pattern recognition and logic to identify repeating structures, quickly gaining insight. Another trial tested endurance and problem-solving under pressure, a maze filled with holographic illusions designed to disorient. While some aliens froze or relied on predetermined strategies, Elias relied on intuition and situational awareness, navigating the maze with surprising speed. With every success, whispers spread among the spectators. Humans were known for unpredictability, yes, but here was a human who not only survived but excelled, demonstrating qualities that even the most disciplined alien could not replicate. By mid-afternoon, the king himself appeared, observing from a high balcony. His expression was unreadable, but Elias felt the weight of the monarch's attention. The trials were not meant to impress alone. They were a test of character, resilience, and ingenuity, qualities the king valued above all else. Elias faced one final trial for the day, a collaboration challenge. He was paired with a Valorian scholar, a noble with deep knowledge of the planet's history and science. They were presented with a mechanical device, a complex machine with countless moving parts designed to demonstrate the alien mastery of technology. The goal was to repair it and make it functional within a limited time. Elias studied the machine. Its complexity was overwhelming, but he noticed something the scholar did not. The machine's design contained subtle gaps, spaces where human ingenuity could simplify the process. While the scholar relied on intricate formulas and precise calculations, Elias experimented with creative shortcuts, testing and adjusting as he went. At first, the scholar looked at him with horror. "You are reckless," he exclaimed in alien tones. "That will break it." Elias grinned. "Or it might fix it faster." Minutes later, the device whirred to life. The crowd erupted into applause. The scholar looked at Elias with astonishment, then nodded in reluctant respect. The king's trials were designed for perfection, yet here was a human who could achieve the same result through ingenuity and daring. As the day drew to a close, Elias walked through the palace gardens to clear his mind. The gardens were suspended in the air, each platform filled with plants that shimmered with bioluminescence. Streams of water floated in arcs, defying gravity, and the air was filled with a subtle fragrance that calmed the senses. Princess Lyriel appeared at his side. "You surprised many today," she said. "Your approach is unlike anything we expected. Tell me, Commander Grant, what drives you to take risks when logic dictates caution?" Elias considered her question. "Humans have survived because we are curious, resourceful, and willing to try what others fear. Rules guide us, but they do not limit us. We act when necessary, even if the path is uncertain. It is not recklessness, it is adaptation." She studied him thoughtfully. "Perhaps that is why your species endures. Your methods are unorthodox, yet effective." They walked in silence for a moment, watching the light shift across the gardens. Elias realized that he was beginning to understand the delicate balance of Valorian society. Here, intellect, precision, and tradition ruled, but human creativity could find a place even in the most rigid structures. When they returned to the palace, Elias was invited to dine with the court. The meal was extraordinary, flavors shifting with temperature and color, textures that changed as he chewed. He marveled at the artistry, yet he noticed that many guests were more concerned with etiquette than enjoyment. Humans, he thought, had a different perspective. Appreciate the moment, adapt to circumstances, and make the most of what you are given. As the evening concluded, the king addressed the court. "The human guest has proven that courage, ingenuity, and adaptability are not bound by species. Let this be a lesson to all. Wisdom is not only in knowledge, but in the use of it. Commander Grant, you have earned our attention and respect. The days ahead will bring more trials, and we will see how far your species can rise." Elias bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I will continue to do my best." Later, as he retired to his quarters, Elias reflected on the day. The trials had been more than tests. They had been a window into a world where intellect, creativity, and bravery were measured in ways humans rarely experienced. And yet, he felt a growing confidence. Humans had a spark, a resourcefulness that no algorithm, tradition, or ritual could replicate. And somewhere deep in the palace, Princess Lyriel watched him with a curious expression, sensing that this human, despite being an outsider, might change the way Valorians saw the galaxy and themselves. Elias had arrived as a guest, but already he felt that he was more than that. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but perhaps that was exactly what the Valorians needed. And so, the trials of curiosity had only just begun. The morning sun shimmered through the crystal towers of Valoria, casting long, colorful reflections across the floating gardens. Commander Elias Grant had barely slept. The trials of curiosity had been exhausting, but exhilarating. For the first time in his life, he had faced beings whose intellect and skill rivaled his own, and he had proven that human ingenuity was not to be underestimated. Yet, a sense of unease lingered. As Elias dressed for the day's festivities, he felt a faint tension in the palace air, something that the others seemed to ignore. Valorians were masters of composure, rarely showing worry or doubt. But Elias' human instincts told him that not everything was as peaceful as it appeared. He was summoned to the palace's central hall, where nobles and honored guests were gathering for a celebration in honor of the king's long reign. The hall had been transformed once again. Towering light sculptures rotated slowly in the air, casting ethereal patterns across the walls. Musical arrangements filled the room, each note producing a cascade of tiny floating lights that twinkled like stars. The atmosphere was breathtaking and almost too perfect. Princess Lyriel approached him, her silver skin glowing softly in the morning light. "You slept little," she observed, "yet you appear ready." "I'm accustomed to long hours in space," Elias replied with a faint smile. Besides, I have learned to pay attention. Sometimes what others overlook can be the most important. Her gaze lingered on him. I wonder if that is why the king took interest in you. Humans notice things differently. Elias nodded, his curiosity piqued. I hope that difference is seen as strength, not weakness. Before she could respond, the king entered the hall, his presence commanding and serene. Today, he said, we celebrate not only the triumphs of our kingdom but also the guests who honor us with their presence. Let the festivities begin. The guests dispersed, some joining in music and dance, others participating in games of intellect and skill. Elias wandered carefully, observing, taking note of behavior, conversation, and subtle signals. He felt a thrill of anticipation. Humans had always excelled at reading situations, and people in ways that more formal, structured species often could not. It wasn't long before he noticed a subtle pattern among the palace staff and lesser nobles. There were whispers behind closed doors, glances exchanged that seemed to carry meaning. For a species that valued transparency and tradition, secrecy was unusual. Elias' instincts prickled. Something was amiss. During the mid-morning, Elias found himself near a side corridor that led to the palace archives. The corridor was quiet, overlooked by most of the guests. Something drew him forward, a faint flicker of light from beneath a door, accompanied by low voices speaking in a language he did not recognize. Curiosity overcame caution. Elias slipped closer, using the shadows for cover. Through the small gap in the door, he saw a group of figures, nobles in deep ceremonial robes, gathered around a glowing map of the palace. Lines of light traced pathways, rooms, and secret passages, some of which were invisible to ordinary guests. They will strike during the evening gala, one said, his tone low but urgent. If the king is distracted, the throne will be ours. Nothing will stand in our way. Elias froze, a coup. The idea seemed almost impossible. This was a society known for centuries of order and loyalty, but the evidence was right in front of him. Humans had a history of survival in unexpected crises, and instinct told him that he could not ignore this danger. He retreated silently, taking a deep breath to calm his racing heart. Now the stakes of his presence on Veloria had shifted. He was no longer simply a guest or a participant in games. He was a potential safeguard for the royal family. Returning to the main hall, Elias' mind raced. He needed to learn more without exposing himself. He couldn't act recklessly. Valorians valued precision and subtlety. But humans had an advantage here, adaptability and instinct. While the conspirators relied on secrecy and timing, Elias could think outside the bounds of their traditions. As the afternoon progressed, the celebration continued in full splendor. Aliens danced, traded gifts, and engaged in intellectual challenges. Elias mingled cautiously, observing everyone. The nobles he had seen in the secret meeting now behaved as if nothing were wrong, laughing and complimenting each other, their faces masks of civility. Princess Lyriel appeared beside him again. You have a keen eye, she said softly. Do you see everything, Commander Grant? Elias shook his head slightly, careful with his words. I see enough. There are patterns most guests miss, things that may seem unimportant but could be critical. She studied him thoughtfully. You speak as one who trusts instincts over tradition. It is rare among outsiders. Elias smiled faintly. Humans have survived by trusting what others overlook. Sometimes caution alone isn't enough. Lyriel's expression softened. She seemed to understand something he could not yet explain. Perhaps that is why you were chosen to attend our celebration, not merely as a guest, but as someone who can see beyond appearances. Elias kept her words in mind, but he had little time for reflection. Evening approached, and the gala was about to begin. The conspirators would make their move soon. He found himself near the palace kitchens, where he overheard a brief conversation among the staff. A guard mentioned unusual orders from a group of nobles, specifying access to certain restricted areas during the gala. That confirmed his fears. The conspirators intended to strike during the celebration when attention was focused elsewhere. Elias needed a plan. Humans were not physically stronger than Valorians, nor could they match their natural elegance or mastery of technology. But humans had improvisation, creativity, and boldness, tools that often turned the tide in desperate situations. He moved quietly through the palace, memorizing paths, noting hidden exits, and calculating where he might intercept any threat without causing panic. If the king and the princess were to remain safe, He would need to act with both courage and subtlety. Meanwhile, Princess Lyriel continued to watch him. She seemed to sense his tension, though she did not yet know the reason. "You carry a weight, human," she said softly, as they walked past a floating fountain. "I do not know what it is, but it is unusual for someone so young to bear it with such composure." Elias hesitated, then chose his words carefully. "Some situations require immediate attention. Humans are trained to respond quickly when circumstances change. I am simply observing, preparing to act if needed." She nodded, her expression a mix of curiosity and admiration. "Then I hope you are prepared. Veloria is not always as orderly as it appears." As the evening gala began, the palace shimmered with grandeur. Guests moved through the halls in a delicate dance of light, music, and ritual, while Elias kept a careful watch. Every laugh, every movement, every whispered word drew his attention. Patterns emerged, subtle hints of unusual behavior among certain nobles. The conspirators struck subtly at first, testing access to restricted areas and coordinating with unseen allies. Elias moved swiftly, using human intuition to anticipate their actions. Unlike the Valorians, he did not follow a rigid protocol. He relied on observation, prediction, and improvisation. He intercepted the first group attempting to access the palace treasury. Without confrontation, he used a combination of timing and distraction to block their path and redirect them toward palace guards, who were trained but not aware of the specific threat. The conspirators hesitated, confused by a human acting in unexpected ways. Elias realized that this was an advantage humans had always possessed: unpredictability. Where Valorians relied on strict rules, humans could bend and adapt, creating opportunities where none seemed to exist. By the time he returned to the main hall, the gala continued uninterrupted. Guests marveled at the lights, music, and floating sculptures, completely unaware of the danger that had passed them by. The king was still enthroned, regal and commanding, oblivious to the near crisis. Princess Lyriel approached Elias once more, her expression thoughtful. "You have done something remarkable," she said quietly. "I do not know the details, and I do not wish to press, but I sense your actions have protected the celebration and the king." Elias allowed a small smile. "Sometimes observation and quick thinking can make all the difference. I simply did what needed to be done." Her eyes held a glimmer of admiration, tinged with curiosity. "Perhaps there is more to humans than we have imagined. You may have abilities we did not anticipate." As the night drew to a close, Elias stood in the balcony gardens, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark sky. He realized that he had survived more than challenges and trials today. He had witnessed human ingenuity at work in a world vastly different from his own, and it had made a difference. For the first time, he felt a subtle shift in the way Valorians viewed him. Not just as a guest, but as someone capable of changing the outcome of events in ways their traditions could not predict. And somewhere deep in the palace, Princess Lyriel watched him from a distance, sensing that the human's presence might become more significant than anyone could have imagined. Elias smiled faintly, the thrill of challenge still running through his veins. The celebrations were far from over, and the days ahead promised new trials. But he knew this: humans had a spark that could survive, adapt, and perhaps even thrive among the stars. The evening sky over Valoria shimmered like liquid crystal, reflecting the lights of the floating palace. Commander Elias Grant moved quietly through the corridors, his senses alert. The gala had ended hours ago, but his instincts told him that the night was far from over. The faint disturbances he had noticed earlier, subtle whispers, suspicious movements, had not gone away. He paused at the top of a stairwell overlooking the main hall. The city below sparkled with activity, unaware of the tension building in the palace. Elias' mind raced. Humans had always survived by thinking fast, improvising, and acting decisively in moments of danger. Tonight, those skills would be tested like never before. From the shadows, he observed several nobles moving purposefully toward restricted areas. Their robes glimmered faintly, signaling allegiance to a faction determined to seize power. Elias realized that the coup attempt he had suspected was now underway. The conspirators intended to strike while the palace was distracted, and the king's safety was at risk. He had no weapons besides a standard human utility device and his wits, but humans were resourceful. Elias took a deep breath and reminded himself of the advantage humans often held: unpredictability. While Valorians relied on precision and adherence to rules, humans could improvise solutions in ways the aliens could not anticipate. Elias moved swiftly, slipping through a side corridor that led to the inner chambers. The first group of conspirators was attempting to access the treasury, likely seeking resources or artifacts to use against the king. He observed them carefully, noting their motions and timing. When they reached the final security panel, Elias acted. Using a combination of misdirection and human ingenuity, he created a minor diversion, a small holographic projection that mimicked a guard's presence. The conspirators froze, unsure how to proceed. In that moment, Elias moved, guiding them toward a corridor that led directly to palace security. The Valorian guards, trained for combat but unprepared for unexpected human tactics, quickly intercepted the conspirators. Elias stayed in the shadows unseen and watched as the first threat was neutralized. His human instincts had worked. The enemy was slowed, confused, and exposed. He did not pause to celebrate. Other groups were already in motion, moving toward the king's private chambers. Elias knew he could not allow them to reach their target. The palace layout was unfamiliar, but humans excelled in adaptability. He scanned the map in his mind, recalling hidden passages and maintenance corridors he had observed earlier. Elias sprinted through one such corridor, leaping over glowing pipes and sliding past suspended platforms. The movement felt natural. Humans were accustomed to improvisation in unpredictable environments. He reached a junction and saw two conspirators attempting to force entry into a secure door. He acted quickly. Using a combination of timing and leverage, he activated a nearby mechanical lever, causing a bulkhead to slide down just as the conspirators reached it. Trapped momentarily, they struggled, giving Elias the opportunity to push an emergency alarm. The piercing signal echoed through the palace, alerting the king's guards to the intrusion. Meanwhile, in the central hall, the gala continued in apparent calm. Guests moved elegantly, unaware of the danger that had almost reached the throne. Princess Lyriel, sensing something amiss, had taken her position near the king, ready to act if necessary. She watched Elias with a mix of admiration and concern, noting the human's calm yet decisive movements. Elias continued his path, intercepting a second group attempting to bypass the outer defenses of the king's chambers. These conspirators were armed with small energy devices, designed to disable security mechanisms. Elias had no comparable weapons, but humans often relied on strategy over brute force. He led them through a maintenance hatch, guiding them into a narrow passageway where their numbers worked against them. The tight space limited their movement, and the guards soon arrived to subdue them. Elias stepped back, breathing steadily. One by one, he had turned potential disaster into manageable threats, relying not on raw strength, but on observation, timing, and improvisation. Finally, only the inner sanctum remained vulnerable. The last conspirator, a high-ranking noble, was moving directly toward the king's chamber, unaware of Elias' presence. Elias crouched above on a suspended walkway, assessing his options. The human mind excelled in calculating risk and opportunity. He noticed a small control panel on the wall near the noble. With careful precision, Elias triggered a subtle mechanical trap, a temporary energy barrier that separated the noble from the door. The barrier was non-lethal but effective, forcing the conspirator to stop and reconsider. At that moment, Elias revealed himself, stepping into view. "Stop," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority beyond the human standard. "The king is not to be harmed." The noble hesitated, startled by the boldness of this lone human confronting him. Human courage often startled other species. It was a trait they did not fully understand. Before the noble could react, palace guards arrived, surrounding him. The human's intervention had given the guards the advantage they needed. Elias exhaled, the tension in his body easing slightly. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the night was far from over. The palace was vast, and more dangers could emerge. He needed to ensure that the king and the princess were safe for the remainder of the celebration. Returning to the king's chamber, Elias found Princess Lyriel waiting. Her expression was a mixture of relief and admiration. "You have done more than any of us could expect," she said softly. "Your actions have prevented disaster." Elias nodded. I did what humans do best, observe, adapt, and act when necessary. It seems your palace was vulnerable to methods we find natural. Lyriel considered his words carefully. Perhaps that is why the king chose to invite you, not merely as a guest, but as someone capable of making a difference when others cannot. Elias felt a flicker of pride, tempered by humility. Humans had always relied on each other and their own wits to survive. Here, far from Earth, he had used those same traits to protect lives and preserve order. The king entered the chamber, his presence commanding yet calm. "Elias Grant," he said, his voice echoing in the hall. "You have acted with courage and intelligence beyond expectation. Your human instincts have protected this palace tonight. You have proven that your species possesses qualities that even the most disciplined Valorians may lack." Elias bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I only acted as humans are trained, to observe, adapt, and respond." The king's gaze softened slightly, a rare expression for a ruler of his stature. "Then you have earned not only our respect but our trust. There may be more challenges ahead, but tonight you have shown that humanity's unpredictability can be a strength." Princess Lyriel stepped closer, her silver skin shimmering in the light of the chamber. "I have watched you, human," she said quietly. "You face danger with composure, act with precision, and think where others hesitate. You are remarkable." Elias met her gaze, sensing a connection that went beyond words. "I only do what I must. Humans have a way of finding solutions where others see none." Lyriel nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps humans can teach us more than we imagined, and perhaps there is more to you than even I anticipated." Outside the chamber, the palace was alive with activity. Guards patrolled diligently, nobles murmured in confusion over the disrupted plans, and the celebration continued, though its glow was tempered by the near crisis. Elias knew the night had revealed something crucial. Humans, with their courage, adaptability, and ingenuity, could change outcomes that seemed predetermined. He took a moment to walk through the balcony gardens, breathing in the luminous fragrances and observing the floating plants. The world of Valoria was one of elegance, intelligence, and beauty, but it was also a world where unpredictability had a role, and humans were masters of unpredictability. As he returned to his quarters, Elias reflected on the night. The challenges had tested more than strength or intellect. They had tested courage, decisiveness, and adaptability. And humans, he realized, excelled precisely because they embraced these traits in ways other species often could not. Somewhere deep within the palace, Princess Lyriel watched him, sensing that this human, this guest, this outsider, was beginning to shape the course of events in ways that even the king might not yet fully understand. Elias had acted alone, yet his presence had altered the outcome of the night, proving that humans were a force to be reckoned with, even among the most advanced civilizations. Elias finally settled into his quarters, exhaustion tugging at his limbs. He had faced danger, outwitted conspirators, and ensured the safety of an entire royal family. The events of the night had demonstrated one undeniable truth. Humans were unpredictable, adaptable, and capable of rising to challenges that others could not. And as he drifted into a deep, well-earned sleep, he felt the thrill of what lay ahead. The celebration would continue, the trials were far from over, and the galaxy was wide enough for humans to show their value in ways no alien species could anticipate. The morning after the gala was quiet. The palace of Valoria glimmered softly in the gentle sunlight, reflecting colors that shifted like liquid rainbows. Commander Elias Grant walked through the floating gardens, his mind still replaying the events of the previous night. The coup attempt had been foiled, and the conspirators were now in custody, their plans revealed and thwarted. Yet the palace still felt alive with tension, as though the kingdom itself was sensing the extraordinary role a human had played in its defense. Elias paused near a fountain, where streams of water floated in arcs before dissolving into sparkling mist. He had long been accustomed to danger and uncertainty, but what he experienced on Valoria was unique. Here, the stakes were not just survival. They were legacy, loyalty, and the delicate balance of an entire civilization. Humans had always faced challenges in strange worlds, but this was the first time Elias had felt that his actions could alter the course of an alien society. Princess Lyriel appeared quietly at his side. Her silver skin shimmered in the morning light, and her eyes, bright and intelligent, held a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You have done more than any of us expected," she said softly. "You saved the king, preserved the celebration, and prevented chaos, yet you remain humble." Elias smiled faintly. "I only acted as humans are trained, observe, adapt, act. Sometimes that is enough." Lyriel's gaze studied him for a long moment. "Enough," she repeated. "You have done far more than that. You have proven that courage, intelligence, and adaptability are not bound by species. You are extraordinary." Elias felt a warmth in his chest. Humans were often underestimated across the galaxy, seen as young, reckless, or unpredictable. Yet here, on this distant world, his species' most fundamental qualities, resilience, ingenuity, and courage, were being recognized and respected. The morning passed with continued celebrations, now more subdued but no less beautiful. Music floated through the palace halls, and holographic storytellers narrated the history of Veloria, recounting the reign of the king and the resilience of the kingdom. Elias walked among the guests, who now looked at him with curiosity and respect rather than suspicion or amusement. He noticed how different his human traits seemed to be perceived here. The Velorians were trained to follow rules, uphold traditions, and value precision above all else. Humans, on the other hand, could improvise, take risks, and think creatively in ways that even the most disciplined alien could not predict. Elias realized that this difference had become his greatest strength. Princess Lyriel rejoined him as the midday light shifted across the palace. "There is something I wish to show you," she said, motioning for him to follow. She led him through a series of corridors he had never seen, past chambers filled with floating artwork and gardens suspended in the air. Eventually, they arrived at a terrace overlooking the city. From this vantage point, the floating towers, the crystal bridges, and the shimmering gardens stretched as far as the eye could see. "This is one of the king's favorite places," Lyriel explained. "It is a place of reflection where decisions are made and futures are considered." She turned to face him. "Elias, yesterday you acted without hesitation to protect our kingdom. You demonstrated human courage, ingenuity, and loyalty. Qualities that even the most advanced of our kind cannot replicate fully. You are remarkable." Elias looked at her, unsure how to respond. In human culture, such praise would be significant, but in Velorian terms it carried even more weight. Here was a princess acknowledging not just his actions, but the very qualities that defined his species. Lyriel continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Tradition dictates that a princess may choose a companion or advisor only from our own people. Yet the king has allowed exceptions before, and I wish to make an exception now. You, human, have earned the right to stand beside me, not as a guest, not as a foreign observer, but as someone whose presence can influence the future of Veloria." Elias' heart raced. He had expected recognition, perhaps gratitude, but not this. To be chosen by the princess herself was beyond anything he had imagined. Humans were outsiders, often underestimated and sometimes dismissed. Yet here his courage, ingenuity, and adaptability had earned him a place of honor among a people whose traditions span centuries. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I never expected this. I only acted to do what was right." Lyriel smiled softly. "And that is precisely why I choose you. You act not for glory, but for what must be done. That is a quality that transcends species, rank, or custom. I see in you a partner, someone who can face challenges alongside me with courage and loyalty. Someone who understands that survival is not just about strength, but about intelligence, creativity, and heart." Elias felt a surge of emotion. Humans were not naturally suited to rigid hierarchies, yet here, his most human traits, his courage, adaptability, and capacity to act in uncertainty, were not only recognized but celebrated. It was a moment of validation, a reminder that humanity's strengths were universal. I will do my best," he said finally, "to stand by you, to serve and to protect, not just because it is my duty, but because I believe in what is right." Lyriel extended her hand. "Then let this be the beginning, Elias Grant. Not as a guest, not as a human outsider, but as someone whose presence can make a difference. Together, we may shape the future of Veloria in ways no one imagined." Elias took her hand, feeling a sense of connection and purpose unlike anything he had experienced before. For the first time, he realized that humans were not just survivors. They were pioneers, capable of rising to challenges in worlds far beyond their own. The day passed in a mixture of ceremony and celebration. Guests observed the new alliance between the princess and the human with curiosity, some skeptical, others inspired. Yet the king himself nodded with quiet approval. Ilias had proven that humans were not only capable of understanding Valorian ways, but of enhancing them through creativity and courage. Later, Ilias found himself walking through the palace gardens with Lyriel. The gardens glowed softly as evening approached, the floating plants and waterfalls reflecting the fading light. The air was fragrant with alien flowers, and the soft hum of energy fields created a peaceful atmosphere. "You have changed the perception of your species here," Lyriel said thoughtfully. "Some of our people doubted humans could contribute meaningfully, but now they see that courage, ingenuity, and adaptability are qualities worthy of respect." Ilias smiled. "Humans have always survived by using those qualities. Perhaps the galaxy has finally begun to understand what we can do." Lyriel's eyes softened. "It is more than understanding, Ilias. It is appreciation, and it is trust. I trust you." The words struck him deeply. Trust was a rare gift among any species, but to receive it from someone as discerning as Princess Lyriel was an honor beyond measure. Humans were often underestimated, yet here, a human had not only earned respect but the confidence of a royal. As night fell, the palace shimmered with light. Holographic displays illuminated the gardens, telling stories of Valoria's history and achievements. Ilias and Lyriel walked among the displays, talking quietly about the future. "There will be challenges ahead," she said. "Threats, rivalries, and the unknown of the galaxy. But I believe that with your presence, humans can be a force for good here. Your unpredictability, your courage, it gives us an advantage we did not anticipate." Ilias nodded. "Humans have a history of rising to challenges, even in worlds that seem impossible. I will do whatever is necessary to protect this kingdom and its people, not because it is required, but because it is right." Lyriel smiled, a rare expression of warmth and pride. "Then let us face the future together," Ilias grant, "as partners, allies, and perhaps something more." Ilias felt a thrill of excitement and purpose. Humans had always been underestimated, but here, on a distant alien world, his species' most fundamental qualities, courage, ingenuity, and adaptability, had been recognized, respected, and celebrated. He was no longer a mere guest. He was part of the kingdom, part of its future, and part of a story that transcended species. The palace seemed to hum with approval, as if Valoria itself acknowledged the alliance. Ilias realized that humans, despite being young in the galaxy, could indeed influence events on the grandest scales. Their creativity, courage, and ability to act decisively in the face of uncertainty were traits that no amount of tradition or technology could replace. As they returned to the palace, Ilias knew that this was more than a personal triumph. It was a statement. Humans were worthy, capable, and essential in any corner of the galaxy. And standing beside Princess Lyriel, he felt the full weight and promise of what that could mean, not just for himself, but for all of humanity. The celebration of Valoria continued, filled with light, music, and wonder. But for Ilias, the true triumph was not in the spectacle. It was in the recognition of humanity's value and the forging of a bond that could change the course of a civilization. And as the stars shimmered above the floating palace, Ilias Grant walked forward with purpose, ready to face the challenges ahead, confident that humans, no matter how young in the galaxy, could rise to any occasion, and perhaps even change the universe, one courageous act at a time.